Hello and welcome to a special recording of our recent series of webinars aimed at starting a discussion on why you should vaporize your BPM to the cloud. Our agenda today, once the introductions are done, is to briefly explain the standpoint on BPM and cloud definitions we have taken for the purposes of this presentation. I will then show you why we feel that the cloud platform makes an ideal partner to implementing a BPM solution backed with some real-life examples in action. Although I'll show you some of what I have selected as great examples of BPM functions being deployed to the cloud, I'm sure you might be interested in specific features or functionality that I haven't got time to demonstrate fully here. When we presented these webinars live, we gave the audience the opportunity to request ad hoc demonstrations or further details of functionality that interested them. As we can't do that for this recording, I've included some of the questions that were asked by the live audience, but if you yourself would like further information or perhaps a one-to-one webinar or meeting to follow this up, please don't hesitate to contact me. So firstly, allow me to introduce myself and ePartner Consulting. The team here at ePartner Consulting have been implementing and supporting data capture and business process management solutions for more than a decade. To help us do this, we have independently selected the best-of-breed partners to represent in each of their specialist areas. Partners like Autonomy Cardiff, Abbey and BP Logics both support and are supported by EPC in delivering solutions in the UK. We have met all kinds of challenges from simple questionnaire processing through to mission-critical timesheet capture. We have faced unique challenges from high volume requirements of capturing over 120,000 paper forms per day through to complicated installations such as our safety card system on 4 oil platforms in the North Sea. We focus on really understanding your business and its requirements so we can provide the best advice and solutions available. I personally have worked in this industry and with the Autonomy Cardiff software for the last 15 years. In my role as Technical Director here at EPC, I have drawn upon that experience to play an instrumental part in selecting our partners from all the vendors available. By combining their software with EPC's team of skilled consultants, I am confident we can become a valued partner to any organisation to help improve and optimise your business processes. So, why are we here today? Moving the IT services to the cloud has entered the mainstream and become the preferred platform for many forward-thinking organisations, but I'm sure you probably already knew that. However, did you know that according to Gartner, 40% of organisations with BPM initiatives used cloud computing last year to support at least 10% of their processes? So perhaps now is the time you should be reviewing your BPM and considering the move to a cloud-based platform. So firstly, I'd like to start with a couple of definitions. Firstly, what is BPM? BPM, or Business Process Management, is often considered just a more contemporary way of saying workflow, and much of the time that is exactly what the orator means when they use the term. However, its true intention is to be a methodology with which to run an organisation, a methodology whereby traditional hierarchies of staff and departments are defocused in favour of structuring an organisation and its planning around the business processes essential to its operation. Therefore, the individual processes become the focus and not the organisation itself. This doesn't just mean step-by-step planning and mapping of processes to resources, although this is often the main part, but that the outputs are measured when this process is in action. This helps provide immediate wins such as increased efficiency, quicker completion of processes and improved visibility with longer term benefits through the continual process improvement too. Now that is great. BPM offers the most if you have the time and resources to implement BPM as an organisational methodology rather than as a reaction to a business need. However, many people I speak to on a daily basis are forced to make a more pragmatic approach, as they need to resolve an existing process weakness or optimise a forthcoming development within their department or area of responsibility. In these cases, BPM does often just mean workflow, with bells and whistles for things like reporting, compliance, document management and auditing. The aim in these cases is to map out a single or few processes and deploy them as quickly as possible within an automated IT infrastructure that improves accessibility, notifications, traceability and data integration and robustness. Both of these uses of BPM can be worthwhile and rewarding. The planned, structured approach for great long-term benefits, or the need for instant workflow deployment to meet real-life demands. So that's two equally relevant interpretations of BPM. But what about the cloud? I probably don't need to explain this in too much detail, other than to say, as my Swiss Army Cloud here illustrates, it's moving your software and services to someone else's data center so you can still get all the benefits without having to worry about their actual physical location or resources. The only IT infrastructure you still need to worry about is ensuring a suitable internet connection. Everything else is handled by your cloud provider. I will come on to some of the specific cloud benefits for BPM later on, but one of the main benefits is the pricing flexibility. Generally for software, there are 4 purchasing plans commonly offered. The first 2 are the traditional purchase of a software license to install and operate on-premise, in either per CPU or per user models. The other two are the cloud options, either a hybrid whereby you purchase a dedicated server license but have it cloud hosted and managed, or a true cloud plan of paying per user per month with little or no initial capital outlay. It's worth mentioning at this point that we can offer all four of these options. Which you choose depends on your organisation, the processes, users, budgets and plans for the future. It may be that the simplicity of buying a license, having some training and managing your entire platform thereafter will offer the best value in the long term. But for many organisations, the priorities are cost, speed of deployment and ongoing flexibility, in which case the cloud is a very persuasive option. So that's BPM in the cloud. Now let's investigate why we feel they make the perfect partnership. The chances are that the goals of implementing a BPM approach in your organisation, or just improving a business process with a BPM solution, will include goals such as reducing your administrative burden and moving data entry to the best qualified people, widening your process audience and boosting accessibility, reducing errors and ad hoc firefighting of exceptions and problems, improving your process speeds and completion times, enhance organisational dynamism, ensure business continuity, to improve process quality and therefore your customer experience, to ensure conformity and compliance, increase visibility for both process participants and management alike, and it prompts focus on process investigation and improvement. So those are some of the most common aims of implementing BPM. Now let's see how the features of the cloud platform meet these. Hosting in the cloud provides no access boundaries, so you can bridge corporate firewalls to include customers or public within your processes. You have global access from anywhere with mobile and tablet support. You can have a single worldwide repository of all your forms, rules and workflows. You remove global reliance on a single local internet connection. You can rely on both dynamic hardware platforms and user licensing that scale to meet demand. The infrastructure, backups and disaster recovery are all managed professionally. It ensures a consistent user experience. You have independent hosting of data and audit trails for compliance. It gives participants instant access to process statuses wherever they are, and you can delegate development between suppliers and internal resources as required. So as you can see, the features inherent of a cloud platform cover many of the benefits sought out by implementing a BPM solution. So if implementing a new BPM methodology or simple workflow system, the cloud might make an ideal partner. However, it would be remiss not to at least mention some of the gotchas that can catch out the unwary. Firstly, one of the points we discussed before was compliance, and one bit of legislation all UK organisations have to adhere to is the EU Data Protection Directive. Fortunately, most IT systems now provide encryption and security features more than adequate to meet these requirements, but physical access to servers is harder to guarantee, and whilst any server located within the EU will be protected by the host's own compliance to the Data Protection Directive, if the server is hosted outside the EU, it almost certainly won't. The United States Patriot Act, for example, directly contravenes the EU Data Protection Directive by allowing law enforcement agencies to access data without having to notify the affected parties. Unless there is a reciprocal data protection agreement between the EU and foreign government concerned, you must ensure that all personal data resides physically within the EU. You also need a really good grasp of the people, data and processes you are trying to optimise and apply BPM to. For the best chances of success, with the business processes there is always a human element involved, and without BPM this can lead to a level of non-conformity, often backed up and given credence by an established track record of doing things in a certain way. Small loopholes and adjustments are often made to accommodate changes or real-life challenges that crop up, and these first need to be found, understood, and either incorporated as part of the process or removed altogether. If only one of these what-ifs is missed at the modelling stage, it can prevent a whole workflow from completing once live. And once the processes have been mapped out, knowing the best way to interact with users, to capture relevant data, and to integrate with other systems requires careful planning and skills. Whether done internally by a skilled business analyst or outsourced to us, don't underestimate the detail and skills required to get this stage right. Lastly, another area for consideration is one of the cloud's greatest benefits, the licensing flexibility. Whilst cloud licensing allows you to pay for just the users you need and when you need them, this does mean that you never have the stability of owning a perpetual license to the software, committing you to maintaining the subscription over the long term. The cloud provides a lower cost of entry to BPM, but when considering the license costs alone over a period of years, it can lead to higher costs, although this extra cost has to be balanced against your savings in infrastructure resourcing too. So whilst careful consideration and research needs to be done first, moving to the cloud is a great solution in many circumstances and certainly offers the most cost-effective way of implementing a BPM approach within your organisation. Now I'd like to introduce Process Director, a BPM solution from BP Logics. Its web-based approach and truly unique methods of form design and publishing mean that it lends itself to cloud hosting just as well as to traditional on-premise hosting. Process Director is a web-based BPM solution that provides e-forms, workflow, business rules, web dashboards and reporting, and development tools. These are the main tools you'll need to build a BPM solution, and just before I give you all a quick run through some of the specific functions showing how Process Director can help you move into the cloud, I wanted to give you a more detailed breakdown of the common functionality within these areas. If any of these topics are of interest and we don't go into enough detail, please don't hesitate to get in touch for further information. So, with eForms, you can benefit from dynamic eForms with data integration. You have data validations and saliency rules applied to the forms. Multilingual forms that can automatically translate, in this case English in the top left of this corner of the screen and German in the bottom right. We can provide mobile device support for tablets, PDAs, mobile phones. Email process responses, allowing people to participate in processes just from a simple email. And embedding attachments and documents into forms themselves is a useful feature. With the workflow, both linear, traditional sort of workflows can be incorporated, but uniquely we also provide timeline workflows which are modelled in a Microsoft project sort of style with a Gantt chart. You can trigger workflows from third-party locally hosted applications over the web, and this is crucial if you have in-house systems or applications that are going to need to integrate with a web-hosted system. You need to bridge a firewall, so the best way of doing that is with web services. And we can create user and workflow steps to allow users to interact with the process. So here we can enter in a quick instruction for a user at a particular step, assign it to a group here, set due dates. We can assign custom tasks and actions if those due dates are not met, set who to notify and at what stages, and then set some advanced parameters such as how many users are required to complete this step and whether we're going to accept email completions and such like. And lastly, we can add predefined or custom tasks to the workflow part. These can consist of tasks to convert forms to PDFs, look up data from Active Directories, for example, export data to databases, import and export data via web services, and generate reports. With the business rules engine, it's important to be able to reuse your rules across an entire organisation. The rules can be applied within eForms or workflows. They can be simple conditional rules or far more complex database rules. With web dashboards and reporting, the web portals with the dashboard and charts and knowledge views within them can be used to display information to the users. Even very complex processes can provide the users with a graphical view of where their form is in the workflow, and also where it's been, who's interacted with that process so far. We can generate advanced reports with dynamic functionality in PDFs and web reports where you click on a table and it drills down and provides further information. And we can merge data dynamically into Excel templates to allow users to very easily access their data. And whilst it's not required for most simple workflows, the development tools are quite important. These provide advanced functionality within either C# or VB.NET scripting. We have a SQL query interface for data integration and a web services API. So those are the eForm, workflow, business rule, dashboard, reporting and development features you are likely to require. I'd now like to run through a brief demonstration of how these can actually be deployed to a cloud-hosted Process Director system. Okay, so I'm now going to switch over to my desktop here, and I'm going to run through all the steps required to actually create an eForm, publish it to the cloud-hosted Process Director environment, and create a workflow for that particular form. I'm going to try and incorporate a few other features, some business rules and things along those lines as well as we go, so hopefully you can get a good feel for the processes involved. Okay, now I'm going to start here with the design of the form. Now you'll notice I'm just using Microsoft Word here, so this is just a standard version of Microsoft Word, and I've laid the form out just using the standard sort of tables and borders and graphics and fonts and things that you've got in Word. It makes it very flexible and very powerful to design some quite good looking forms quite easily. As you can see, I've inserted logos and various other objects here as well. Let me just show you how to add a couple of extra fields to this. I've already added a lot of basic sort of fields, things like the name field at the top here, field for an email address. We've got an attachment object, so we can attach objects to the form. There's some radio button groups down here to allow the user to rate their satisfaction, a signature comments box. So I'm just going to add a couple of extra fields in now. So if you want to add a department drop-down list here, to add a drop-down list of all the departments, just select that here. I'm going to call it dept, and I can add in a field here for the manager's name, GR name. Okay, there we go. And over here we're going to add in a box for the manager's email address. And lastly, the date section here, I'm going to put in a system variable which is the current system date. Okay, there we go. So that's the basic process of creating a form. As you can see, it's quite simple, straightforward, and drag and drop, and done within an environment that most people are familiar with. So what I need to do now is save that form and then switch to the hosted process director system. Now you notice I'm just using Internet Explorer here, so I'm connected to our pd.ebc.co.uk hosted process director system here, just through a web browser. Now I've selected the file that I've just edited, and I just need to click the upload new version button to upload that Word file to the cloud server. That'll take a second or two, and then it will take me to a page where I can now see all the fields that it's taken out of the Word file here. So you'll notice that it's got the MGR email, MGR name, the fields that we added onto there. So the next step at this stage is to create some sort of rules and functionality around the fields themselves. So in this case, for example, on the email address field here, I can click on the edit here and I can set the data type for that to be an email address. I can also set it to be a required field so that it won't let me submit the form unless there's a valid value been put into there. We can set the comments section. This is by the radio group where the user rates puts a rating in. Now we can say here we only want to collect comments if they give us a really poor rating. So I'm going to say this particular group of fields is only visible when the response is less than 2. Otherwise that field is hidden, and therefore the user won't be able to see it or put a response into there. Right, I could also set the manager's email address and name fields here to be read only in certain circumstances. So I'm going to say the fields are disabled when the department drop-down list is not blank. Now the reason I'm doing that is it'll allow the user to actually key in their manager's name and email address if they wish, but if they select a department and it's able to automatically fill their manager's name and email address from the fact they've selected their department, then it'll disable those boxes and won't allow the users to key that information in. So let me just set that one to disabled under the same condition. Okay. Now we also need to set the department field to be an event field, because this is the one we're going to trigger a lookup on to actually pre-fill the manager's email address and name. So we've set that to be an event field. I think that's probably what I need to set up at this stage. So if I just click the update button to save my changes. Now I need to create a couple of custom tasks to firstly pre-fill that drop-down list from a database, and also we can pre-fill the manager's name and email address based on the selection there. Now the first thing I'm going to do is fill the drop-down list. Now you can just give it a set list, so if you had a field that was sort of pick your favourite colour, you could fill it with red, blue, green and yellow, but in this case I'm going to actually dynamically pull the values in the drop-down list back from a database. So at the form creation time I'm going to run this event to populate the department names from the department table in my database. I'm going to put those values into the dept field that I've created on the form, and I need one more custom task, again a database connector. I'm going to fill fields from the database, and I'm going to do this on that dept field. So when we change the value in the department drop down list, it's going to run this event, and this is going to take data from our dept table. And the way this is going to work is if the department ID equals the department they've selected on the form, we are going to put the department manager's email address into the manager email field and the department manager's name into the manager name field. Okay, if I update that as well. Okay, so that's the basics of setting up a form, and that's all now ready to go. Someone could fill that form in, and we've got that sort of dynamic functionality should now be working on the form. But before we get to that, I'm also going to add a workflow to this, so it goes through several stages before the form is considered complete. Now, if I go to my cloud workflow that I've created a blank one here, so this is just a blank workflow. You can see we've got an object for a start and an end, but nothing in between yet. Now I'm going to add in first of all a user step. So we're going to get a user to do something. In this case, they're going to approve the form. I'm then going to have let's put a PDF stage in. So we're going to convert the form to a PDF. I'm going to have a content action to export that data and the PDF out to a folder. And also I want to put a notify step in down the bottom here. And I'm going to have a different branch and different eventualities will cause that branch to be taken. Okay, so let me link together the objects that I've put onto the form. And as you can see, you just simply drag from one item to the other to create a branch between them. Now I'm going to do this alternative loop down the bottom here. Okay, so there's my basic workflow laid out. Now, the first thing I need to do is configure my user step over here. So if we call this approve, it's going to be an approve step. I'm going to give an instruction to the user when they get to this that just says please approve this form. I'm going to assign it to, in this case I'm just going to assign it to myself. It could be obviously a dynamic value, but in this case I'm just going to assign this step to myself. I'm going to say it's got to be done within 5 days. If that doesn't happen, then we're going to cancel the step. Or in fact we could cancel the entire workflow if that's not done, or whatever. We've got all sorts of different options there. So if I go to the notifications, we can choose who to notify. So I'm going to say when the step completes, notify the managers group. And then lastly, from the advanced options tab, I'm going to set it so when it is complete, when the first user completes the task. Obviously in this case I've only assigned it to myself, but it could be that I add another user. I want to delegate it to another user to complete that step on my behalf, in which case I don't want both myself and him to have to complete it, so when either of us complete it, that step will be considered complete. Okay, if we configure the PDF step now, we just need to set the form that we want to use to create the PDF. I'm going to say current form only and attach it to the workflow once it's generated the PDF. The export items, equally straightforward to set up. I'm going to say I want to export the workflow references, i.e. the PDF, all object types, and I'm just going to put it into the C drive on my machine for now. Okay, and then my notify step down here, this could be just notify someone. We don't need to do this, but we just want to send a notification. So in this case, if I select my notify step, I'm going to notify when the step starts. Sorry, I'm going to notify a business rule value here. I've actually created a business rule called notify user, and this actually works out who the most appropriate user is to notify, and perhaps that could be set, and I think in this case I've set it based on the department, so depending on the department the user selects, it will choose the most appropriate user to notify. Now this branch here, we've got two branches to take. We need to tell it that we only want to take this bottom branch under a certain condition. And in this case I'm going to simply set up a form field value and say that if the response again is less than 2 perhaps, take this branch. If it's more than a 2, so they're a happy customer, it'll go around the top sort of part. So we've very simply set a conditional branch there. Okay, so if I just click OK to save that, now you'll notice there's several other objects in my folder here that I've got, which I'll show you these all working briefly in a moment. I've got a knowledge view here, which is just a way of collating data across the system and presenting that to a user in what we call a knowledge view. That can either be just a table of data, or it can be a chart or a graph. It's sort of a dynamic dashboard or sort of basic reporting. I've got my form that you saw me upload, which is created from the Word file, my workflow that I've just created. This is my business rule down the bottom here. This allows me to decide which user to notify based on some values in the form. I've got an Excel report template here. This allows me to dynamically merge the data that people submit into the form into an Excel file, and then send that to, or let the users download that and view their data. And lastly, I've got another knowledge view down the bottom here, just so I can see my running cloud processes that are actually in action at any one time. Okay, so those are all the components that I've built for this particular process. Now, if I log out of the system with my administrator account and log back in as my cloud user that I've created, just for the purpose of this demonstration. Now, this is exactly as a user will see it when they log into the system. So if you imagine the cloud user is one of your users, and they'll log in. Now, the first thing you'll notice, I've got a warning that's telling me there's no matching rows for this chart, because so far we've just created the form and haven't actually submitted any, so that effectively the chart's empty. So it just displays that sort of warning. But in a moment, when I've submitted a form, you'll notice that this dashboard view it'll change. There'll be a lot more information in here. So I've created a button at the top here to actually view my cloud form, and when I click on that, you'll notice that it's now showing me an HTML version of the form, which looks almost identical to the Word version that we were designing earlier. Now I can fill this in, so I can type my name in. The email address, out of interest, we set as a required field, so you notice it's highlighted it differently to bring the user's attention to the fact that they can't submit this form if it's blank. Indeed, if I try, it's going to warn me and say this email address field is required, and if I put something invalid in there that isn't an email address, again it'll warn me that it needs to be a properly formatted email address. So let me just enter one of those. Now you remember on the manager's name and the manager's email, we left it so that it was enabled all the time we didn't select a value from the department field. So at this point I could type in my manager's name and manager's email address if I wanted, but equally I could select a department from the drop down list, at which point when it goes away and does the lookup to find out that the user's name and email address, and also it disables those fields, so I as the user now can't overwrite that information. So there's a bit of dynamic functionality, and you saw how easy it was to actually implement not only filling the drop down list from a database, but also filling fields from a lookup and disabling fields as well. Now we've got the attach object here, so I can attach a file to my form. If I browse, select a Word file for example here, and upload that, you see it's just embedded it straight into the document there with a username and a date and everything next to it as well. I can remove that, I can open it, or I can view the history. Perhaps it might get modified several times during the course of this form until completion. I've got my rate radio buttons down the bottom here. Now remember, if we said it was less than 2, it would display the comments box over here, but if the value selected is higher than 2, it won't. So you can see that sort of dynamic functionality is working as well. Okay, so if I submit this form, you'll notice on my web desktop here some information has started to appear. My little chart doesn't look very impressive yet. Only one record in there, but we can see where that particular one record has got to, and we can see some data down the bottom here as well. Now what I'm going to do is quickly fill in another one of those. Select a different value here, submit that, and I'm going to fill in yet another one. I'm just filling in dummy data here, so it doesn't really matter what I put in. But if I just fill in the fields just so it allows me to submit it, refresh the page. Now you'll notice that my knowledge views here are now starting to show some far more interesting data. Over the left hand side I've got a graph that's showing the ratings that are being submitted. Down the bottom here I've got the actual data for each of those forms, and over the left hand side here I can see the active processes that are in action at the moment. Now as a user I might want to actually download all the data that's submitted to these forms, so you'll notice I've got a little Excel icon at the top right here. If I click on that, Internet Explorer will just download the file and ask me do I want to open it. I'll click yes. You'll see there's a predefined template with a cover page here, and on the data tab I've actually got the raw data of the forms that have been submitted, and that's done generated dynamically. So you'll notice if I open up the form and fill in another one, just filling in the fields that are required, click submit. Now as soon as I've done that, I can click back on the Excel file, open it again, and the data has now been updated already to include that new record that we've just submitted. So it's a very quick and dynamic way of getting the data down to the users, and the ability to use predefined Excel templates is great because you can format them and put charts and graphs and things in here. So it's a very powerful way of getting data to the clients and also providing ad hoc reporting using just Excel's reporting functionality. We can also over here see the current workflows that are in action. If I refresh that, we should see our fourth one that we submitted. Now I can see the individual workflows, I can see when they were started, and I can see the current step that each one is with and the user it's with. But I could also click on this properties button here. In fact, actually what I might do is make that window a little bit larger before I do that, so we can actually see properly what's going on. So if I click on the properties, I can see this routing slip here which shows that it was initiated by the cloud user and it's now currently with a user called Alan for approval. And as this goes through a process, if there's multiple steps, we could use this as a full audit trail to see exactly where and when the form was touched by any member of staff. And if I go to the administration tab here, there's a graphical view where I can actually see where the form is and who's got that step active at the moment. Okay, if I go back to the desktop here for a moment. Okay, I think that shows how you sort of set up a form, how the users would see it and fill it in, and the power of the reporting and the knowledge use that we've built into that. Now, when we were presenting this live, we were asked several sort of questions. When we got to this stage, so I just wanted to outline the answers to a couple of those, which we felt were quite relevant. One of them was one of the points I mentioned during the demonstration was that we can use web services to interact with this process director system. Now, it may be that you've got an existing database internally, and as a user adds a record or modifies some data in it, you need it to trigger off an approval process or some other sort of workflow. Now, the way we can do that is via web services, and I've set up a quick demonstration of that here. So this is just a Microsoft SQL Server I'm using for this example, and you'll see I've got a table called Cloud which has got some records in it, and I've got a trigger on this particular table, and this trigger, when a new record is inserted into this table, it causes Process Director to start a workflow, and the trigger just purely calls a web service of Process Director, so it will work over port 80 or 443 and won't have any problems spanning your firewalls and getting out to the internet. And we can actually see this working. If I add a new record in here, now that looked pretty straightforward. We've just added a record. Now, of course, I'm using the Microsoft SQL Administrator here, but it could be your own proprietary system, whatever that uses the data, could have created that record. But if I go back over here to the Process Director Web Desktop and refresh the display, you'll notice that a new one has appeared here. There's no initiator listed because it was initiated anonymously in this case, just via a web service. But you can see that just by adding a record in our SQL database in the Office, we've triggered a new process to start within the workflow system. So that's quite a good demonstration of that powerful feature working. Some of the other things we were asked during the live presentations were about the form design using Word. Now, obviously, Word is probably the most common method used. It allows people to create the forms in a system they're familiar with. But we could also support form design using Microsoft Visual Studio, either the free downloaded Express version or the full paid-for development tool. And that allows you much more powerful control over designing forms in an environment more familiar to developers. It also means that they can write scripts using C# or VB.NET with those forms and publish them together at the same time. And certainly if you're writing much script for workflows and forms, that might be an easier or more powerful way of doing it. But as you saw, it's simple enough with Word, and most of our clients purely just use Word for that sort of thing. One penultimate question we were asked during the live presentations was about the data that we exported out of our Excel. We were also asked, is it possible to put data into the system flexibly like that as well, and allow users to upload data because they wouldn't necessarily have access to Microsoft SQL Server or your other proprietary internal systems to be able to do that. And the answer is yes, that in exactly the same way as we can merge data into Excel templates and allow the users to dynamically download those, we can also allow the users to download a template, insert the data themselves, and then re-upload that template back into the system, and the system will import that data from Excel and populate the tables or the form fields with that data. So getting data into the system is equally flexible in that front. And finally, the last point which we covered, we were asked about the web portals, which I showed you over here. Now this is one that I've just put together as a quick demonstration for today, but it's important to understand that the users can have multiple profiles like this, and you can design them quite dynamically. So I'm logged in as a cloud user, and all I've got is access to this one profile. But if I log off and log back on with my administrator profile, now I've got a totally different profile here, you see, which takes me straight into sort of the back end, the configuration and setup of the system. But equally, I could go in here and select the dashboard profile, and perhaps I might assign this to a certain class of user. It allows them to view a dashboard of reporting information. And the information that you put in those is totally up to you, and you can define it. You can even embed your own web pages or intranet pages into those as well, or you can create new intranet style pages just with HTML and put those into there as well. Okay, thank you for your time today. That concludes the demonstration, I think. If there's anything that we haven't got into enough detail with here, or anything you'd like further information on, as I said earlier, please don't hesitate to contact myself or one of the team here, and we'll be glad to help you out. Otherwise, thank you very much for your time, and we'll hope to see you soon. Thank you. Bye.